Moscow's elevator predator. In the shadowy Moscow of the 1990s, a predator turned elevators into traps, preying on the city's most vulnerable, children. 5 gripping chapters unravel this chilling mystery, from the fading Soviet communal life, leaving kids exposed in a crime-ridden capital, to October 24, 1994, when 2 14-year-old girls were assaulted in a lift on Severodvinskaya Street, sparking a wave of terror. Oleg Kosarev, a cunning serial rapist, stalked schoolgirls, using knives and threats to silence them while robbing their innocence and possessions. As the body count rose, Investigator Galina Zinovskina led a desperate manhunt, only to discover a shocking twist: a second predator, Valery Deev, mirroring Kosarev's crimes. Together, they terrorized Moscow, with Kosarev linked to 108 assaults and Deev to 50, leaving a trail of trauma. Arrested through a daring sting, will these monsters face true justice, or will their shadows linger over Moscow's children? In the close-knit Moscow of the Soviet era, safety was a given. But what darkness emerged as the dream faded? The warm air of Moscow in the 1970s carries the scent of fresh bread, communal chatter, and the faint tang of coal as children play in a courtyard on Severodvinskaya Street, the murmur of neighbors' laughter echoing through the block, the air humming with the rhythm of Soviet life, the scent of paper in young pioneer handbooks, a symbol of unity, the air tense with the anticipation of a structured day, the murmur of school bells, a quiet harmony, the scent of pine, a distant echo from the parks beyond, the air heavy with the weight of a collective spirit, the murmur of watchful eyes, a comforting presence, the air tense with the realization that everyone is known, the scent of community, a shield against danger. What darkness emerged as this dream faded, and who would it claim? The scent of pine and nostalgia fills the air, Moscow a stage for a tale of innocence lost. The Soviet communal life. In the Soviet Union, life revolves around the collective, the air thick with the scent of shared meals and stories as families friend by apartments. The murmur of courtyard games, a quiet hum. The scent of paper in school records a testament to control. The air tense with the murmur of pioneer meetings. The scent of pine heavy as children march in formation. The air humming with the realization that neighbors know every detail. The murmur of the local policeman, a quiet reassurance. The air heavy with the weight of a system that sees all. The scent of community, a protective web. The air tense with the anticipation of safety. The murmur of a society where no one is anonymous, a quiet strength. What would happen when this web unraveled? The rise of high-rise isolation. By the late 1980s, Moscow transforms, the air sharp with the scent of concrete and progress as high-rises replace communal flats. The murmur of construction, a quiet hum. The scent of paper in relocation notices a symbol of change. The air tense with the murmur of neighbors becoming strangers. The scent of pine, a distant memory as parks are paved over. The air humming with the realization that anonymity is rising. The murmur of isolation, a quiet threat. The air heavy with the weight of a city losing its soul. The scent of fear, a whisper as people no longer know who lives next door. The air tense with the anticipation of vulnerability. The murmur of a new Moscow, a chilling shift. Who would exploit this new anonymity? A surge in crime. The 1990s bring chaos. The air thick with the scent of desperation and steel as crime surges. The murmur of homeless voices echoing in the streets. The scent of paper in police reports, a grim record. The air tense with the murmur of besprizorny, street children, roaming free. The scent of pine, a haunting echo as parks become danger zones. The air humming with the realization that the vulnerable are prey. The murmur of sexual violence, a rising tide. The air heavy with the weight of a city-turned predator. The scent of fear, a crushing force as children become targets. The air tense with the anticipation of terror. The murmur of a police force overwhelmed, a quiet despair. What monster would strike in this lawless void? In a Moscow lift, two girls faced a nightmare. But what predator hunted in the daylight? The crisp air of October 24, 1994, fills Severodvinskaya Street in Moscow. The scent of autumn leaves, chalk dust, and the faint tang of steel, heavy as two 14-year-old girls, Katya and Lena, walk home from school. The murmur of their laughter echoing through the courtyard, the air humming with the innocence of youth, the scent of paper in their school diaries a symbol of routine, the air tense with the anticipation of safety, the murmur of the school bells echo, a quiet memory, the scent of pine, a distant whisper from the park nearby, the air heavy with the weight of a city unaware, the murmur of footsteps behind them a quiet threat, the air tense with the realization that danger lurks, the scent of fear a whisper beneath their chatter. What predator hunted in the daylight, and who would he claim? The scent of pine and dread fills the air, Moscow a stage for a tale of terror, of the assault on Severodvinskaya. Katya and Lena enter their building, the air sharp with the scent of steel and dust as the lift doors close, the murmur of the mechanism a quiet hum, the scent of paper in their diaries a fragile shield, the air tense with the murmur of a stranger stepping in, the scent of pine, a faint echo as he pulls a knife, the air humming with the realization that they're trapped, the murmur of his threats a chilling whisper. "I'll cut your families if you speak." The air heavy with the weight of their fear, the scent of fear a rising tide as he assaults them, the air tense with the anticipation of escape, the murmur of their sobs a quiet plea, the air humming with the urgency of their survival, the scent of steel, a haunting reminder of his power. What would this monster do next? A second attack on Malagina. Just 2 hours later, the air grows colder on Malagina Street, the scent of frost and steel heavy as two more girls face the same horror, the murmur of their footsteps a quiet hum, the scent of paper in their diaries, a fragile hope, the air tense with the murmur of the lift's hum, the scent of pine, a cruel irony as the man strikes again, the air humming with the realization that he's insatiable, the murmur of his demands, $12,000 from their home, a chilling threat, the air heavy with the weight of their captivity, the scent of fear, a crushing force as he holds one hostage, the air tense with the anticipation of violence, the murmur of a mother's call to police, a desperate cry, the air humming with the urgency of a city under siege, the scent of steel, a haunting echo of his cruelty. How many more would fall before he was stopped? The police respond. Police flood the area, the air thick with the scent of urgency and steel as operatives search. The murmur of their radios a quiet hum, the scent of paper in their reports a grim necessity. The air tense with the murmur of their footsteps, the scent of pine, a distant memory as they scour courtyards. The air humming with the realization that he's vanished. The murmur of their frustration a quiet storm. The air heavy with the weight of a predator at large. The scent of fear, a rising tide as they find no trace. The air tense with the anticipation of another attack. The murmur of a city on edge, a chilling truth. The air humming with the urgency of their task. The scent of steel, a reminder of their failure. What clues would lead them to this monster? In Moscow's schools, children lived in fear. But what clues would unmask the elevator predator? The chilly air of late 1994 fills Moscow's residential districts. The scent of frost, chalk dust, and the faint tang of steel heavy as children hurry home from school. The murmur of their footsteps echoing through the streets. The air humming with the tension of a city on edge. The scent of paper in their diaries a fragile shield. The air tense with the anticipation of danger. The murmur of school bells a haunting echo. The scent of pine a distant whisper from the parks. The air heavy with the weight of a predator's shadow. The murmur of parents' warnings a quiet hum. the air tense with the realization that lifts are traps, the scent of fear a rising tide beneath their chatter. What clues would unmask the elevator predator, and who would he strike next? The scent of pine and dread fills the air, Moscow a stage for a tale of terror. A city gripped by fear. Moscow's parents grow vigilant, the air sharp with the scent of urgency and fear as they escort children from school, the murmur of their voices a quiet hum. The scent of paper in school notices a grim warning, the air tense with the murmur of teachers' advice. Never ride with strangers. The scent of pine a cruel irony as parks become danger zones. The air humming with the realization that the predator is relentless. The murmur of newspaper headlines, a chilling echo. The air heavy with the weight of a city under siege. The scent of fear, a crushing force as children avoid lifts. The air tense with the anticipation of another attack. The murmur of a community in crisis, a quiet storm. What pattern would reveal his next move? The predator's pattern. Investigators piece together clues, the air thick with the scent of paper and tension as Galina Zinovskina leads the task force. The murmur of their voices, a quiet hum. The scent of steel, heavy as they analyze reports. The air tense with the murmur of a psychological profile. The scent of pine, a haunting backdrop as they note his habits. Striking after school, targeting lifts, wiping fingerprints. The air humming with the realization that he's meticulous. The murmur of his voice on lift intercoms a chilling clue. The air heavy with the weight of his caution. The scent of fear a rising tide as they link him to school photos. The air tense with the anticipation of a breakthrough. The murmur of a city holding its breath a quiet plea. What would it take to catch this elusive monster? A shocking attack on Isakovsky. On January 26, 1995, horror escalates on Isakovsky Street. The air sharp with the scent of frost and steel as 5 children, 3 girls, 2 boys, are assaulted in a lift. The murmur of the lift's halt a quiet hum. The scent of paper in their diaries a fragile shield. The air tense with the murmur of the predator's threats. The scent of pine a distant echo as he forces them to undress. The air humming with the realization that he's sadistic. The murmur of his cruelty a chilling truth. The air heavy with the weight of their trauma. The scent of fear, a crushing force as he steals their money and jewelry. The air tense with the anticipation of his next move. The murmur of a city in shock, a quiet storm. How would they stop this escalating terror? In Moscow's lifts, the terror continued. But what shocking truth emerged from the shadows? The tense air of spring 1995 fills Moscow's streets, the scent of rain, fear, and the faint tang of steel heavy as children avoid lifts. The murmur of their footsteps, a quiet hum, the air humming with the dread of a predator. The scent of paper in police reports a grim necessity. The air tense with the anticipation of another attack. The murmur of school bells a haunting echo. The scent of pine, a distant whisper from the parks. The air heavy with the weight of a city under siege. The murmur of parents' whispers a quiet storm. The air tense with the realization that the predator is still at large. The scent of fear, a rising tide beneath their caution. What shocking truth emerged from the shadows, and who else was hunting? The scent of pine and dread fills the air, Moscow a stage for a tale of terror. The capture of Kosarev. On October 31, 1995, a breakthrough comes on Arbat Street, the air sharp with the scent of urgency and steel as operatives spot a suspicious vendor. The murmur of their voices a quiet hum, the scent of paper in their warrants a grim necessity. The air tense with the murmur of Oleg Kosarev's arrest. The scent of pine a distant echo as they seize stolen goods. The air humming with the realization that he's the predator. The murmur of his camera a chilling clue. Photos of victims. The air heavy with the weight of his crimes. The scent of fear a crushing force as he denies guilt. The air tense with the anticipation of justice. The murmur of a city relieved a fragile hope. What secrets would his arrest reveal? A new wave of attacks. A month later, terror resurfaces on Marshal Katakova Street, the air thick with the scent of frost and steel as a 15-year-old girl is assaulted in a lift. The murmur of her screams a quiet hum, the scent of paper in her diary a fragile shield, the air tense with the murmur of the predator's description, dark glasses, black cap, the scent of pine, a cruel irony as Kosarev sits in jail, the air humming with the realization that another predator is at large, the murmur of attacks on Leskov Street a chilling echo, the air heavy with the weight of a copycat, the scent of fear a rising tide as the city reels, the air tense with the anticipation of a second monster, the murmur of a baffled investigation, a quiet storm. Who was this new predator, and how did he know Kosarev? The double revealed. Kosarev's revelation stuns investigators, the air sharp with the scent of paper and tension as he describes a doppelgänger, the murmur of his voice a quiet hum, the scent of steel heavy as they recall a sighting on Chechirina Street, the air tense with the murmur of their plan, the scent of pine a haunting backdrop as they dress an operative to mimic Kosarev, the air humming with the realization that the double, Valery Deev, is real. The murmur of their sting operation a desperate bid, the air heavy with the weight of a second arrest, the scent of fear a crushing force as Deev is caught, the air tense with the anticipation of justice, the murmur of a city in shock, a chilling truth. Would this end the nightmare, or was more terror to come? In a Moscow prison, two predators faced their fate. But would justice heal the city's scars? The cold air of 1996 fills a Moscow courtroom, the scent of paper, tension, and the faint tang of steel heavy as Oleg Kosarev and Valery Deev face trial. The murmur of the judge's voice a quiet hum, the air humming with the weight of justice, the scent of paper in the verdict a promise of closure, the air tense with the anticipation of a reckoning. The murmur of victims' testimonies a quiet storm, the scent of pine a haunting echo of the parks where terror began, the air heavy with the weight of a city's trauma, the murmur of Kosarev's 108 assaults a chilling record, the air tense with the realization that Deev's 50 crimes add to the toll, the scent of fear a lingering shadow. Would justice heal the city's scars, or would the terror linger? The scent of pine and justice fills the air, Moscow a stage for a tale of reckoning. The trial of Kosarev and Deev. The courtroom buzzes, the air thick with the scent of paper and tension as the trial unfolds. The murmur of the prosecutor's voice a quiet hum, the scent of steel heavy as evidence is presented. The air tense with the murmur of Kosarev's photos, the scent of pine a haunting backdrop as Deev's knife is shown. The air humming with the realization that they're unrepentant, the murmur of their past convictions a chilling truth, the air heavy with the weight of their sentences, 15 years each, the scent of fear a crushing force as the gallery weeps, the air tense with the anticipation of closure, the murmur of a city's relief, a quiet exhale, the air humming with the urgency of the verdict, the scent of steel a reminder of their crimes. What would prison hold for these monsters? The legacy of trauma. The air grows colder with the scent of paper and dread as the victim's trauma lingers. The murmur of their voices a quiet hum, the scent of pine heavy as they recount their pain. The air tense with the murmur of lifelong scars. The scent of paper in therapy notes a grim record. The air humming with the realization that healing is distant. The murmur of a city's fear, a quiet echo. The air heavy with the weight of a generation marked. The scent of fear, a crushing force, as parents remain vigilant. The air tense with the anticipation of new threats. The murmur of a school bell, a haunting reminder. The air humming with the urgency of protection. The scent of pine, a symbol of a city forever changed. Would Moscow ever feel safe again? A shadow of fear remains. The air chills with the scent of paper and uncertainty as Kosarev and Deev face prison. The murmur of their sentences a quiet hum, the scent of steel heavy as they're led away. The air tense with the murmur of their peers' disdain, the scent of pine a haunting echo as they're marked by their crimes. The air humming with the realization that others may lurk, the murmur of a city on edge, a chilling truth. The air heavy with the weight of an unresolved fear. The scent of fear, a crushing force as the school bell rings. The air tense with the anticipation of unseen predators. The murmur of a future uncertain. A quiet warning. The air humming with the urgency of vigilance. The scent of pine, a reminder of a terror that may never fade. Will the shadow of fear ever lift from Moscow's children? Don't scroll past. Hit like and subscribe if you're ready for the next twisted story.